Donald Trump is painting a very dark picture of the economy. He is claiming that Biden and Harris are anti-energy, and he's blaming them for the stock market crashing. So let's get things straight for fact's sake. This administration is producing record amounts of oil, and VP Harris just pledged not to ban fracking. And look over at the stock market. The Dow is up nearly 18% over the last year. Vaughn, there was a lot of nonsense in this speech. Much of it, and I'm not speaking subjectively, it is fair to say much of it was incoherent. There weren't even complete sentences. What am I missing?
I think that's a really good point you make. I mean, for more than an hour, Stephanie, he outlined what was billed as an economic speech. Frankly, he was asked by one of the individuals by the Economic Club of New York about his child care policy. It was not coherent. There was no exact policy or details that were provided. He went back to suggesting that he would put imports or put tariffs on all imported goods. He called for the rescinding of carbon emission standards. He called for a rescinding of tax credits for electric vehicles. He went on to call for a corporate tax rate staying at 21%, extending the 2017 tax legislation that he and Republicans on Capitol Hill passed. But by and large, there was very little in the form of new actual economic policy introduced. Of course, you heard Donald Trump there suggest that he was going to put Elon Musk in charge of this commission that would audit the federal government, but there's no details, there's no actual substance or specifics on what that would even look like. And they say government waste, but this is a Republican Party that has been very unspecific about government waste. And it was the Trump administration that added more to the deficit than the Democratic administration. So I think oftentimes we're looking for answers, and frankly, we don't quite always get them.
And while cutting the corporate tax rate, people are like, well, if he cuts corporate taxes more, my goodness, it'll goose the stock market. And he has yet to explain ever how he would pay for it. Here's the thing, John. This speech was an absolute word salad, right? They served word salad for lunch at the New York Economic Club. But the thing that is most galling, that wasn't a low information room. Those are highly financially literate people. Right? It was just reported today, Howard Lutnick, the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, is now the key Wall Street person speaking to Wall Street on Trump's transition team. Every single person in that room knew it was pure nonsense he was spouting, and some of them even applauded. What is going on here?
These are people who don't give a salad about whether Donald Trump is going to do X policy or Y policy as long as their taxes come down, right? It doesn't matter whether he's got a Veg-O-Matic where his mouth should be just spitting out vegetables all over the room. If he's going to cut taxes, and he says he's going to cut taxes, and he has, by the way, a record of cutting taxes for these guys, they're going to be happy. That's it. I mean, he comes up with this government efficiency commission. The idea here is to figure out where there are improper payments and fraud. He's going to audit the federal government. It's a brilliant idea. The founders came up with it. It's called Congress.
Listen,
that's what they do for a living.
Listen, it's not necessarily a bad idea, but because the government spends way too much money and it doesn't have the discipline and proper audit. But Elon Musk is going to be the guy doing it?
Well, I mean, look, Tesla is successful in large part because of the subsidies that it got from the federal government. So here's a guy who's like, this is kind of like the robber. I mean, I'm not saying he committed any crimes, but this is like the robber, guarding the bank, right? Like, he is somebody who has benefited from the government largesse as much as anybody in this country, turning on, by the way, his entire SpaceX built on the backs of our federal tax dollars in the space program that we used to have. So that's not an attack on Elon Musk, but simply like he is somebody who very much has taken advantage of the things that he says now are so bad.
I wonder if he'll audit those big government contracts that he has. Kayla, Kamala Harris has been messaging a very pro-business agenda to voters. She laid it out this week. What reporting do you have on her economic pitch?
Well, for one, Harris is talking about the economy a lot different than Biden. Really, Biden was focused on defending his record. He constantly touted the 15 million jobs that have been added to the economy since he took office. She's taking a very different approach. She is starting from the basis point that many Americans are feeling, which is the economic pain. And often Biden's messaging felt very detached from that. But really, we saw the first sign this week that she is going to have a more pro-business approach when it comes to policymaking. We saw that with her small business proposals, potentially increasing tax-deductible expenses from $5,000 to $50,000 for startups. And she is still increasing this capital gains tax from 20% to 28% on earnings of more than $1 million. But that is far less than what Biden had proposed in his budget proposal, which would be almost a 40% rate. So she's definitely taking a different approach than Biden and starting to show how she's differentiating herself from the incumbent.
So, John, where does the narrative come from that she's less pro-business than Joe Biden was, right? Her actual numbers in her policies are more pro-Biden than are more pro-business than Biden. Then why is there this narrative that she's super progressive, she's borderline communist? The numbers don't bear any of that out.
I mean, the honest answer is the narrative comes from the campaign she ran in 2019 when she was trying to get as far to the left as she possibly could to win the Democratic primary. In the course of time since then, she joined a Biden administration that was much more moderate than she had campaigned. And she is now effectively continuing. I know there are some adjustments here and there, but she's effectively continuing what Biden has laid out there. So when you talk about the child tax credit expansion, Joe Biden also wanted to, and it did at one point, expand the child tax credit. When you talk about first-time home buyers, money for them, her number is a little bigger than Joe Biden's. He had 15,000, I think, proposed. Hers is 25,000. So you look through those policies, and it's basically like moving in the same direction. And to your point, at the very beginning of the show, you pointed out all these numbers that say the economy is actually in pretty good shape. The problem, it comes in telling people that the economy is in good shape when they know that prices are hurting their wallets. And they are. And whether you are buying, beans at the grocery store or a yacht, you feel inflation. Everybody in this country knows that things cost significantly more than they did 2, 3, 4 years ago. And, part of Kamala Harris's job over the course of the next couple of months is to explain to them things will get worse if Donald Trump is president, in her view, and better if she's president.
And that's sort of the point that, yes, inflation is a problem. But Donald Trump has not explained one single thing that would help this country with inflation. And in fact, you've got economists across the country who are saying his policies are inflationary. What? Tariffs, for example, make everything cost more. When we had those tariffs during the Trump administration, what did it do? It put farmers in a hole, and then we ended up with a huge farm aid program. Can we go back to Elon Musk, though? Because Elon Musk's response to Donald Trump possibly giving him this big post in his administration, he tweeted and he said he looks forward to serving America if the opportunity arises, but no pay needed. This isn't about salary. The power of the presidency is worth more than Musk could ever be paid. Let's be clear. It is not about a salary. But if Elon Musk is in a position to be a shadow president, to sit behind a wall and get whatever he wants from Donald Trump, that is worth far more than any salary. Is he actually fooling people with this idea that, no, I'm just here to help? I mean, come on.
I think there's two parts of it. Number one, that there is a legitimate story to be told about Elon Musk and his own move to the right. If you follow his own Twitter or X account, he is somebody that basks in conspiracy theories. And he is the one at the forefront of pushing the ideas that there are undocumented immigrants that are coming into the country at the hands of Democrats to vote. This is somebody who has found the popularity that Donald Trump found with the right wing and Tucker Carlson, and has embraced that moment at a point in time in which you see the amount of the workforce that he laid off at Twitter or X, and the way that they, again, I will use the word bask in the idea that somehow X is working more efficiently or is working just as at least effectively, when if anybody is on that program clearly knows that it is not. And yet when you look at what the Trump administration did 2 weeks before the 2020 election, when they did that executive order creating Schedule F that would allow the Trump administration, if there was going to be that second term, to go and reclassify the thousands of civil servant workers and turn them into political appointees, effectively firing career employees. It's not clear what their plans were. Was it 5,000 employees, 10,000 employees, 100,000 employees, million employees? That is an outstanding question. And if you are tapping Elon Musk, who has basked in the idea that he effectively was able to consolidate their workforce at his private company and would be able to do the same within the federal government, that is what folks should take seriously, because Donald Trump tried to do that at the end of his first administration with every intent to fire a potentially large segment of the federal workforce in his second administration.